Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to another episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by a retail coach who shares her knowledge and business in the real estate agency. It's Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Before we get into actually what you do, can you just explain to people who you are, where you grew up?
Yeah, so my name is Lindsay. I am from the Midwest. I grew up in Ohio. Um, my outlook on life was really shaped by what I saw around me. I grew up in an area that's called the Rust Belt. The auto industry was declining at the time I was growing up. So I saw a lot of economic depression really affecting a lot of families. And I was fortunate enough to go to college. I had a 4-year degree in graphic design. And when I graduated, it was 2007. And as we all know, the financial crisis happened in 2008. And I had a really difficult time finding a job in my field or any job that would pay you something worthwhile for taking out all those student loans. And I kind of job hopped a lot throughout my 20s. I did a little bit of design work. I freelanced on the side just to get some experience and use my degree because I was passionate about graphic design. And I eventually started my own business as a designer. I really struggled through it. I learned a lot. And at that time, I started researching wealth building, really working on my financial literacy. And I came across the concept of quote unquote passive income. And I started learning more about real estate. And I learned that, through owning real estate, you can have rental properties and you can receive monthly cash flow as well as, you own an appreciating asset, hopefully appreciating asset. And so I learned more about that. And I spent several years just learning, researching, reading books, listening to podcasts. And I was really scared and didn't know how to switch from graphic design into real estate investing. So what I did was I decided let me see if I can get a job working for somebody who's doing this, and that way I can see firsthand what their daily life is like, and then maybe I'll have the knowledge and confidence to do it myself. And that's exactly what I did. I worked for another real estate investor in my market. I was his executive assistant and I learned everything about his business. I worked for him for about 3 years, and then I actually bought my first investment property while I was working for him, and then I eventually left his company and started my own business doing the same thing.
And going back to your childhood, as you said, you was in a economically declining area. How did that affect you and your peers as you was growing up?
Yeah. So my parents, I would say they're very working class, blue collar. My mom was actually a graphic designer. She worked for the same printing company for 35 years. My dad was a welder. And he also had second and third jobs at some points in our life. He had his own welding business. He was a welder. He also taught welding. And so, you know, we had a good life. We always had everything we needed. We went on vacations, but I knew there were sometimes financial struggles in my family. There were times when, I would hear my parents argue or there was tension. And it just wasn't as stable. It's like we kind of almost lived above our means, it felt like we had really nice things, but it was a stretch for my parents, right? So I grew up hearing and seeing that, and it really really affected my mindset and viewpoint on money and what I wanted for my own life. I wanted more stability and more abundance in my own life, instead of kind of always living above my means and struggling to have enough money.
And going back to your job in real estate, for people who don't know or understand, how does making money on real estate actually work?
Yeah, so there's a ton of different things you can do in real estate. I'm a real estate investor. So what I do is I market to off market properties, meaning they're not listed on the MLS with a realtor. I go direct to the owner, and I'm looking for certain situational properties or what we call distressed properties. So usually these are properties that need repairs, and I can buy them below market value, and then I either resell them for a profit a lot of times I'll resell them to like landlords or fix and flippers. And then sometimes I keep them in my portfolio. I have rentals and then I have owner finance properties. So an owner finance property is where I sell the property to a borrower or an owner. They live in the property, they do all the maintenance. It's their home. They're just paying me the monthly payment. I'm essentially the bank for them. So those are just kind of two different strategies I like to use in my long-term portfolio.
And when you decided to invest in your first property, how scary was it investing all that money and not knowing what to do?
Yeah. So it's interesting. My actual really first investment as a real estate investor was not actually a property that I owned. So I lent money to the guy I was working for. I gave him some money to buy a property and he paid me back interest payments for several months. And then he paid back the balance in full. And that to me felt a lot safer than buying a property because I didn't have to know all the ins and outs of the property, the transaction. I trusted him because I worked for him. I saw his financials. I saw his business. I knew that he knew what he was doing. So I felt okay. And I was lucky enough that I had some extra money available. My husband and I both work really hard and we had some extra money in our savings. So I decided to put that money to work. I could have put that money in the stock market, but I wanted to get started in real estate. So I did that. And then after doing that, I thought I want to get more hands-on. I actually want to own my own property. So that's when I actually started, I would say working leads in the system, meaning talking to these property owners, these distressed property owners, and learning that whole process. And I think I got maybe 7 or 8 properties under contract before I actually got one that made it through the closing process. Those other ones I had to cancel for various reasons. So that was also a big learning for me that, it's not easy. It's not easy to do this. And it takes a lot of resilience, a lot of patience, and a lot of persistence. But when I did eventually get that first property, yes, it was scary, but I also had enough experience and support because of where I was working that it was very manageable.
And as you said, you started venturing out on your own in 2007, and then obviously we had the recession and stuff hit the world. How did that affect the real estate market? And did you want to give up during that period of 2008?
Well, I wasn't active in real estate back then. That's actually when I graduated college. I didn't really get into real estate. Yeah, that's okay. I didn't get into real estate until 2020, but I have a lot of experience with other investors who were around during that time. And what happened during the financial crisis is there became like an abundance of inventory and they were able to get all of these foreclosure homes, homes before market, below market value. And it was just really, it was a really crazy time. And also I've heard from investors who had portfolios, had properties, and they lost a lot of money. So it affected people differently.
And did that sort of happen the same again during COVID time?
Oh, yes. A lot of people, especially when, they put the freeze on rent payments. A lot of investors use leverage. They get loans from the bank. They still have to make those bank payments. And if they're not receiving rent, they're just either, taking money from their business, their own personal money, whatever. They still have to cover those payments. Or they can sell the property. But I mean, if somebody is living there, you can't kick them out because you couldn't evict people either. It was a really sticky situation. And, I didn't have a portfolio back then because I was just getting started, but I've heard a lot. It was very challenging for a lot of people.
And do you deal with corporate properties as well?
What do you mean by corporate properties?
So, like if people need office space and that, because what I want to ask is with the way the world's heading online, a lot of companies are not setting up bricks and mortar places. Yeah. It's more going online. So how are you finding that affecting the market?
Yeah, so I personally do not invest in what we call commercial properties. Commercial properties are like those retail spaces, business spaces. I personally don't invest in them, but I've heard that there is a decline in demand for those brick and mortar spaces. There are a lot of buildings that are just sitting empty right now. So yeah, I've definitely heard a lot about that going on.
And with the cost of living crisis hitting the world as well, how are you finding that in the rental space for homeowners and landlords?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So as the access to home ownership goes down, the demand for rentals goes up. Because if you can't own a home, what are really your choices? You can rent, maybe you live with family members, various things. So the demand for rentals are going up. So I guess that's advantageous if you own rental properties. But at the same time, we're seeing people are really being squeezed financially, and also rents keep going up as well. So it can be a little tough, but I think part of my purpose as a real estate investor is that I want to provide more affordable housing opportunities to people. One thing I invest in a lot is mobile homes on land, because mobile homes are a lot cheaper than houses. And so there's a big demand for them. And then for me as an investor, I can buy them at a lower entry price, right? So it takes less capital to acquire those properties, so I can acquire more of them, and I might get the same cash flow as I would from a single family home. So I really like that asset class.
How risky is investing in real estate compared to investing in stocks? Is it the same risk or?
Um, so I would say real estate is probably less volatile than the stock market. The stock market goes up and down on a daily basis. If you invest in property, as long as you are smart, do your research, the likelihood of losing money on that property is very slim. So I would say it's probably safer than the stock market. But again, there are still risks. I don't want to make it sound like there aren't.
Yeah.
But you can always, one thing about real estate is there's so many different strategies. You can be a passive investor, you can be an active investor like me who does this full time. Or like I said, you can be a passive investor like my first investment I talked about, where I just gave money to an investor and he paid me back interest on it. And for me, that felt much safer than the stock market because I knew this guy, I had a relationship with him, I've seen his success, and I knew that he wasn't going to lose my money. And I probably got around a 10% return on that money. So for me, I think I have more trust in real estate than I do the stock market.
And being a female in this industry, do you find people try and take you for a ride and stuff because they see you as a female?
Yeah, absolutely. I really had to unlearn some of my socializing, some of my upbringing. Women are socialized to be caretakers, to make people happy, to manage people's emotions. We don't want people to dislike us. And in this industry, I've had to really learn to ask for what I want, to have very strict boundaries, especially when I'm negotiating with somebody over a deal. And also just to be very straightforward. Otherwise, yes, people will walk all over you. They'll try to take so much from the deal, and then it's no longer a win-win. It's they're getting what they want, and I'm not really getting what I want. So.
And then when you're negotiating and stuff, how do you know if it's time to walk away? And is that a scary point as well?
It's actually not. Because I have systems and processes in my business where I'm constantly marketing, I know that there's always new opportunities coming through the door. So I do approach every single deal with, if they're not willing to meet me where I need to be numbers wise, terms wise, then I'm going to walk away. And I think that's always the most powerful negotiating position, being able to walk away.
Exactly. And also, you decided to get into coaching others in this field. Why did you decide to become a coach and a mentor?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty new for me, but I think so. There's only 35% of real estate investors are women, so women are still in the minority in this field. And women couldn't even have their own bank accounts till the 1970s. So there's a lot of catching up to do, and I think it's really important for someone who's doing this every day to open doors for other women who want to do this, who want more financial stability, who want access to wealth building. because, you know, I have my own experiences as a busy mom, as a woman in this industry, and I just think that could be valuable to other people who are too scared to get started or they don't know what the next steps to take.
And do you find that more stressful giving advice then? Because in a way, if you get your own property and it goes wrong, that's sort of on you. But if you're advising someone, that could affect them. So do you find that more stressful than just your day-to-day work?
I don't, because I'm never going to tell somebody what to do. I'm never going to tell them what to invest in. I'm just going to give them the resources to do their own due diligence. And, you know, they can ask my opinion on something, but again, it's their responsibility. They're the ones making the investment. So I don't really find that too stressful.
No, I think that's the main thing we've got to push out to people. If you're going to seek a coach, it's just advice. It's still your responsibility to make the correct decision.
Right.
Yeah. Obviously, being in a high stressful situation, how do you support your mental health? Because obviously you've got a family to run, you've got your business to run, you've got your coaching to do. So how do you look after yourself?
I love that question. That's a great question. Mental health is so important for me. I love having this conversation. Throughout my adulthood, I've suffered from depression. I've suffered from anxiety, no matter what job I had been in. And I actually take medication for it, which helps me out a lot. I know that's controversial. Some people believe in medication, some don't. That's fine. To each their own. But for me, I know medication helps me a lot. I also have 2 coaches that I work with, and they help me with my business. And then I delegate a lot because I am a mom, I'm a wife, I have a busy household, busy business. I have a personal assistant. I have my husband and we share the domestic load pretty equally, and also caretaking for our children. Our children go to daycare. So I also carve out time for myself. I meditate. I walk in the morning with my dog after my kids go to daycare. Just give myself some downtime, some quiet time. And then I also work out 5 days a week. And that helps me. I think that helps my mental health more than probably my physical health, because it's just a great way to have time for myself, to move my body, and really let my mind relax, I guess. So.
And what's one of your biggest tips to give to someone who's looking to start in the real estate business?
I would say have a clear idea of what your goals are with real estate. Are you looking to make, quick, large sums of money? Then if that's what you want to do, maybe look into wholesaling or fix and flips. If you want a long-term wealth building strategy, then maybe you want to acquire rental properties. But regardless of your goals, I think it's really important to start educating yourself, read some books about real estate investing. Bigger Pockets is a great website that have tons of podcasts, books, resources. And then I would say connect with people in your local market who are already doing it. Most cities or regional areas in the United States have a club that's called the Real Estate Investors Association, REIA, REIA. You can look those up and just go to a meeting, and you'll meet other people who are investing in real estate.
And if people want your help and advice, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Lindsay Sharma. I spell my name Lindsay. And I also have a website, LindsySharmaProperties.com.
And what we'll do, we'll chuck the links in the description below so people can get to you quicker. Right, we're coming to the end of the interview, and I've got one last question. And this question I ask every guest. But if you could be remembered for one word and one word only, what would it be and why?
I would say generosity. I always try to give more than I take in every relationship I have. And I think that's very important. I also do that in my business. So, yeah.
Generosity. Well, brilliant. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. And we're more than happy to have you back on in the future.
Thank you, Lee. I enjoyed it.